Mark, how you doing?
Good, good. Welcome to Sugar Valley, Georgia, Bill.
We're glad to be here. Have you been out this morning hunting raccoons or bears or anything, or is that for another day?
Now, I figured I'd let them have a little peace for a while.
Give them the day off.
Yeah, they need it.
It looks like you've got electricity. Do you have running water too? Is that just a myth that you don't have running water? Or
You can do fantastic things with lighting. Just it does. Yeah.
all right, man. All right. Well, good. Sugar Valley. I keep saying I got to come down and see where you live someday. You're not too far away. Should I
Sure.
be? I mean, it's the kind of place when you pull up and everybody knows there's Heath. Everybody knows that you don't belong there. Is that the kind of place like that, or are they welcome you in? How's it work?
Well, I mean, if you got the right lingo, they won't make the statement you ain't from around here. So, but if they say that, you're in trouble.
That's funny. That's funny, man.
So,
Well, cool. Well, thanks for joining up this morning. So we've talked about it before, but it's a good story. So tell everybody if you remember how we met.
we met years ago. I used to travel with several groups of different evangelists, and one of them would we did several outreaches at the Democratic convention, and I kind of enjoyed it's a hard ministry, but it's kind of enjoyed it. And so they had a Democratic convention in Charlotte when Obama made his second acceptance speech, and a friend of mine from North Carolina, he helped me to get hooked up, and so I traveled over there via the Megabus. Megabus is a bus service that travels from major city to major city. It's relatively inexpensive, and so that's the way I traveled. But when I got off, I traveled over there, did the outreach, come back, and when I got off the bus, I looked down on a tag and on a piece of luggage, and it said Bill Adams. And I remember back earlier that year, the fellow named Robert Gray had told me, "Hey, you really need to meet this guy named Bill Adams," and told me a little bit about your ministry. And so I looked up and saw the hat with all the bones on it and all that stuff. And I said, "Are you Bill?" He said, "Yeah." So that's how we met. We exchanged phone numbers, and I think we did a Georgia Tech game. Was the first time that we got together. You test drove me, I guess, took me out on the street, see if I was really genuine or not, and then from there it just went from there. So
That's
yeah,
cool. Did you enjoy the convention that year? That was a good setup. Charlotte's a good city for that kind of thing. Did you enjoy it?
yeah, it was good. We worked with we had a lot of help from the North Carolina the Charlotte, North Carolina Baptist Convention. They helped us out a lot with lodging, and they did several outreaches um, at the Democratic Convention as well, and so we were able to have. They provided a lot for us, so it was good outreach.
That was great. That was amazingly, security. Well, at least in the downtown area, which would be Trine and Trade up in that intersection. It
Right?
wasn't bad. It was we weren't that close to it, but they let you go. It was pretty free flowing, didn't you think? I mean,
It was. Yeah, we did the Democratic Convention in Denver when Obama made his first acceptance speech, and boy, that was pretty tight security. That was high security. So
where did y'all preach then? I've been there a couple times. Where were y'all at?
uh, we couldn't get very close to the stadium on the day, but we were down there on the 16th Street Mall
Yeah.
during the day, and wherever we could find events. And I think it was a larger group of us that went out there with the mission board, and so we did. I think we did some community neighborhood type stuff ministry as well. So
That's a good spot. Well, yeah, on that bus especially, we would have had to known we were on that bus to find each other. Well, that's a miracle that we met.
right,
He just dropped us off. The megabus just dropped us off on the sidewalk right there, a little north of downtown, right?
right,
And
yeah.
we weren't standing around we were trying to go. So that was amazing. Yeah, we've been. It's been great to meet you ever since. How long's that been? I guess that was 2012. It was 11 years. Let's see, 8 or 9 years.
I guess that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, we've been to lots of places together and to London twice, 3 times. How
Three
many
times.
times?
Yeah.
3 times. And you've been a Super Bowl team leader twice. And so we spent a lot of time together. So always great to be with you. But tell us first, before we get into the ministry stuff, just your testimony, your Christian testimony, salvation testimony.
Well, I was raised in Canton, Ohio. I didn't have really a church background. My mom was of Catholic descent, and my dad, my grandmother was Methodist, and she would take us to vacation Bible school. And so that was really the only experience we had with true gospel messages, was that once a year we go to vacation Bible school with her. Of course, as you progress in life, I grew up during the days of went in the Army during the Reagan administration. It was the great American dream, money, power, success, all those things the world said you should have. And so there was a drive and effort to attain all those things. And so after getting out of the Army, I moved to Georgia because we were in recession, and there wasn't a lot of work. So a lot of work in Atlanta. So I picked up a job pretty quick and began working as a mechanic and a welder. Worked on high-rise construction and equipment, and just heavy equipment mechanic is what I was. But I met a beautiful lady, a Georgia peach from the Gainesville, Georgia area, and we, just like sinners, we moved in together and lived together for 10 years. And then it's like one day, everything fell apart. Lost my wife, my home, my job, lost everything that meant anything to me. And first thing you do is, you raise your fist and you start blaming God for all the things that he's done wrong in your life. And then as time went on, as people go through these emotional issues of the crisis, I began to be more open and receptive, and I began to ask the why question, why God? And so I started opening up the Bible and reading the Bible for myself and attending church. And so there was just...
Let me ask you a question. Why did you start reading the Bible then?
I had a guy that worked.
I was. How did you have it?
I was a supervisor at a big welding shop in Gainesville, Georgia, and I run the whole shop. And we hired the Department of Corrections was across the street, and there was a parole office was across the street. And so a guy was there, and we used to get a lot of guys that come across the street, looking for a job, and we hired one who'd become a Christian while he was in prison. And of course, I always ridiculed him and made fun of him and stuff. But when my life fell apart, he just basically said, "Mark, I know somebody that can help you." And he started telling me a little bit about Jesus, but he started pointing me towards the Bible. And so that's when I started. After my anger issue, I started overcoming that and started reading the Bible. Started going to church, and I was going to a church. It was more of a high church, and they'd preach, and pastor would stand up, and he was a great orator, spoke a good message. He'd stand up and give an invitation. I never understood what all that was about because I never was really convicted. And then one day I walked into Newtown Baptist Church, and it was just an old country preacher, and he was not a great orator. He just preached the gospel, and the power of God was there. And there was a guy sitting beside me, and I just pushed him out into the aisle and said, "I got to go." Time of invitation, I didn't know what it was all about, but I knew I had to go. And I went down there, and he threw his Bible on the altar and showed me some scriptures, and we got down on the altar, and of course, 15 guys gathered around me and prayed for me. And I prayed, and I was like, I get up, and guys are like going, "Hey, praise the Lord, brother, you just got saved." I'm like, "What do you mean saved? What is that?" I had no theological background. And so, but what I noticed was the days that followed that was radical and uncontrollable changes started occurring in my life. And, my desires were changing. I hated the way I talked. I really loved reading the Bible. I loved being around church and all that. And so that's when I began to realize that something had happened that day. And it was truly what happened. I was born again. But I guess the whole story of the testimony is not doesn't end there. Uh, I began seeking the Lord and praying and asking God to, to just got real serious with my Christian walk. I had no evangelism training, but I was so excited about what had happened to me. I just started telling people about Jesus. I didn't have any scriptures memorized or anything like that, but God honored that in such a way that after such a period of time, that He restored my marriage, and so that's when my wife and I got back together, and we finally married at that point, and God moved us into the sweet village of Sugar Valley, Georgia. So that's basically my salvation testimony.
What length of time was that? 1 year, 5 years?
It was over a year. Yeah, probably
Over a year.
probably closer to a year and a half.
What do the folks say at your work?
They started noticing the change. I had moved away from Gainesville and I moved over here, and so
Okay.
yeah, but the folks that I was working with here, they noticed a change in my life. And I had a buddy that lived over here, and he was helping me out. He started noticing the change in my life, and so yeah, it was it was a good time. The Lord did a great work.
What about your parents, mom and dad, brother? What was their response? Did you tell them?
I did, and I got kind of a mixed bag on that, and I got people from both all ends of the spectrum on it. People who were receptive and people who weren't, and then some people who would just, I guess, tolerate or listen or whatever. So we had uh, several of my family members were saved. I recently preached my mom's funeral, and my mom she was saved. I was there the day she got saved, and it's just the same thing. Started noticing the changes that occurred in her life. She read her Bible. She went to Bible study. She joined a church. All the evidence was there of salvation. So, but it's refreshing when you see that.
What was the biggest thing that you and salvation and the new birth that happened that, of course, you said you really didn't understand what was happening. But looking back on it, what's been the most, apart from doing ministry work, just in your life, the most surprising part of it? You look back.
I don't know. Recently, well, in the past 10 years, I've had cataract surgery, and at the age of 45, I had cataracts that brought me to a place of almost blindness, and but after the surgery, everything was so bright, and I guess that's the best explanation I can have for what happened. The most amazing thing was just everything was just so much brighter. The doom and gloom of the world and the way that I used to live was gone, and the fear of judgment and all that stuff was gone. I've never had a struggle with whether or not I'm saved. I've always, there's always been that assurance of salvation, and so I guess the greatest thing is just everything's just when you get into spiritual light, it's like having the cataracts removed from your eyes. You can see more clearly.
That's good. Well, that's good. So, one more question. We'll move on to your ministry. So, the transition from Gainesville to Sugar Valley, what led you to move? How did that work? And was that a divine move, or how did that work?
I would definitely call it divine. This is where I walked into the church at Calhoun, Georgia, which is just about 8 miles from where we currently live. Is where the church is that I heard the gospel.
Oh, I see. That's where you heard it.
Right.
In Calhoun.
Yeah.
Oh, not in. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. When my wife and I separated, I had to go west, young man. So I did.
Oh, you
but I only moved about 60 miles west. So, but
where Where's the high church in Calhoun too?
It was, yeah.
You remember the name of it?
It was First Baptist.
I got you.
Yeah.
So you moved to Calhoun, and you left your work, and then you were there. I got you. Okay.
And
So then a year later, got reconciled, and did she move to Calhoun, or was she already there?
no, we sold the place in Gainesville, and then she moved to Sugar Valley with me, and so and about First Baptist, I don't want to say anything negative about it. I mean, First Baptist was a very integral part of my salvation experience. In that, there was a friend of mine that was here, and then he had his in-laws lived here, and they went to the First Baptist Church, and I was so hurt and so hungry for some answers that I asked them. I said, "Can I go to church with y'all?" And so they took me to church, and so it got me into the mode of regularly attending church, and so it was a good thing. And the pastor was discerning. There were things that I asked him to baptize me when I wasn't even saved, and he didn't give me a straight answer, but he just told me I can't do that. And so it was there were a lot of good things about it. So that are involved in that. So
I got you. That's clear. All that stuff. That's good too. I went to they call Walk to Emmaus, or Walk to Emmaus.
yes.
That was that was very pivotal. It was certainly out of the moment what I was used to. So yeah, all those things work together. I got you. Okay, Calhoun. All right. So you settled down. Well, tell us how you got into ministry. I don't think things settled down at all. So you go down the aisle, they pray for you, and you begin to evangelize, right? How'd that go?
My journey into ministry, I guess, started right at salvation because, like I said, I didn't have any evangelism training. I was just excited. I started telling people about Jesus, and I was labeled fanatical. And then I began to find training and things that were going on, and people started inviting me to things, and they asked me to. I was only saved for like 2 years, and I was 33 years old, and I was just reading the Bible, and I was growing on the things that I was reading and learning, and going to church every chance I could get. And within 2 years, they asked me to be the evangelism director of a countywide crusade, and so that I started getting invites to do things, and I got involved in correctional ministry. I started preaching, or I started going to a county jail, and I would go to the county jail, and you'd meet up with the chaplain, and preachers would go in, and I'd just hook up with a preacher when I got there and go in and just go cell to cell, minister to the witness to the inmates. And then I remember very distinctively praying one Thursday morning, God, bless the jail ministry, give the preacher the message that he needs. And I remember that near audible voice of God that said, what are you going to do if the preacher don't show up? And so I got to, I scratched out an outline and stuck it in my Bible. And when I got to the jail that night, there was not a preacher in sight. So they locked me in a cell block, and I preached my first message as a layman. And I preached in the county jail for a year before I ever answered the call to preach. And it was under the same preacher that I was saved under. He preached a message that Sunday morning, Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. I knew it was coming, but it was that strong urge of the Holy Spirit to make it public, and so I did. I went forward and announced my call to preach, and the pastor says, well, if God's called you to preach, he's giving you a message, you're preaching next Sunday. And that's kind of where it started, and from there, when I first started, that was in 2002, my ministry just kind of exploded as a pulpit ministry. I was preaching a lot, probably, 40 to 50 Sundays a year. And occasionally I'd preach revivals and stuff. And so my ministry really started out as a pulpit ministry. Of course, I stayed involved in correctional ministries, and we did correctional ministries up until COVID. So, but there's been that was kind of my journey into preaching, and then 2004, I was preaching a revival in not far from here, and I just felt like God was going to do something at the revival. Yeah, you get that feeling God's going to do something, and so I preached Sunday morning and nothing happened. Preached Sunday night, nothing happened. Um, Preached Monday, and I was just so frustrated with nothing's happening. And so Tuesday morning, I get up. I took time off of work to preach this revival. It was in November, and I got in my study and I was praying, and I was praying for hours, and I was praying about this meeting, and God gave me a message. First thing God did was He broke my heart, and then He gave me a message on brokenness, and I just went into the church and preached that message that night. And when I did, before I could finish my sermon, this pastor, I looked down, and the pulpit was elevated pretty high. It was an old school stage, like a gymnasium stage. And the pastor's laying flat down on the floor, face down, weeping. And the church people were just broken all over the church. And people just wept for over 20 minutes in the church. And the next night, I preached a real simple message on heaven. And when I did, people began to respond to the invitation. And how I knew it was so real and so powerful was that it was Wednesday night, and people had dropped their kids off for that service. The people were pulling in the parking lot and falling under conviction in their car in the parking lot, having not heard the message, and running into church and getting saved. Um, so the revival meeting lasted, I think it was 12 days. And it was during that time that God told me to quit my job. And so that was like November, and I quit my job December 1st. So I'm full time an evangelist December 1st, 2007. And I had this many preaching appointments. I had this much income, and it was totally a work of faith. And in July of the following year, my wife quit her job, and we were just totally faith based in the ministry, and we still are today. We're not totally supported by any church denomination. We just have a donor base. We have a pulpit ministry that we take a little money in from. We also we do a little bit of a tent making. We do leather craft to sell leather products to raise funds for our ministry.
Wow. So on that night when that sort of broke loose, those 12 days, what did you imagine was happening? Was it going to go forever? Or what were you thinking?
Well, working in the church, I've come to realize that, ultimately it's the pastors. I can see what's happening because I'm the one that's been spending 6 hours in prayer every day for this revival meeting. But ultimately, it's his decision. I'm under his authority. The evangelist is always under the authority of the pastor. And so I realized that, it had to be his decision. And so, I could see something much bigger happening. And of course, you have this grand vision that revival is going to sweep the nation over this one message that you preached. But it's ultimately, like I said, it's the pastors. And I've been in some where they've made good decisions, and I've been in some where they've made decisions that I wouldn't call so good. But
So did you have a sense that it was going to go on? I mean, did he have to shut it down, or did it just kind of spike up and come to an end?
this pastor was very willing, and he just said on Wednesday night, he said, we're having a meeting again tomorrow. And he said, we're going to continue until God gets done. And so he had a real heart to see things happen. And there was a number. And in fact, some of the people who were saved during that revival, most of them are still in that church. That was in 2007. And so, it was a real thing. It wasn't the evangelist coaxing people to make a decision. It was a real deal.
Wow. So you must have been, well, I know, I didn't know you then, but I know you wouldn't have gotten quiet about it, but you must have had some pretty high get aspiration. That's not the best word. Most of the time, once I was over going into full-time work. But what did you think when God said go full-time? What did you anticipate happening?
I mean, I didn't know when I first entered the ministry. I had a vague, I guess I would call it a vague view of the evangelist and his calling. I assumed that every evangelist was the guy who preaches revivals for churches, and but when I answered the call and went into the field of evangelism, I began to realize how broad the field of evangelism was. I mean, I went to a revival meeting not far from here, and I met a fellow named Brian Fawcett, who's a full-time preaching evangelist, a pulpit evangelist, and he's a great, great revival preacher. Went to hear him preach, and I was chatting with him in the parking lot. He said, "Hey, you need to meet a guy named Victor Benavides at the North American Mission Board." Well, I did, and I found out that they were full-time. He had an outreach where they'd go into the inner city, and we would knock on doors. We would witness to people on the street. It's a full-time witnessing. And then I met up with Joe Toy, and Joe does the paintboard preaching, and then chaplaincy, and there's just a broad field of evangelism and evangelist in the ministry. And so I really didn't know, but basically here's how I set my ministry up. God, he called some to be apostles, some prophets, Ephesians 4:11 and 12, some evangelists and pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edification of the body of Christ. 3 points. So we set up our ministry with a 3-point. We're a teaching ministry, a preaching ministry, and a reaching ministry. And those three fit under one of those three headings in Ephesians 4:11 and 12. The perfecting of the saints, the work of the ministry, and the edification of the body of Christ. So.
Well, that's interesting. So you got into it, and here you are, let's see, 2007, about 14 years later. Looking back on it, did it, like if you were to talk to somebody that had not done ministry work, what would you tell them that you got to, how was your Christian life? Or, well, I won't say quite that way, but if you do ministry life, you seem to get to know the Lord quite a bit better than if you don't. You really see His face. So how would you describe your experience with the Lord in ministry to someone who's never done ministry before? Get closer, learn to be close.
I guess I'd make several points. One is, being in ministry is like driving a vehicle with no power steering. God, it's easier to steer it when it's moving. And so that's the way we are. If you're just sitting still waiting on God to do something, God's not going to steer you. I found that God moves me more when I'm doing something, even if it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. God will direct me and lead me and guide me as long as I'm doing something in the work of the ministry. And so I guess the first point what I would make is, be active, doing something. Don't be afraid to try different ministry experiences just to see. I mean, we drove all the way to Texas and got involved in an outreach at the Texas State Fair, and we found out it was so not for us. But I mean, that's part of it. We wouldn't have known if we hadn't went. We'd still be wondering, hey, we're supposed to do this. And then secondly, I would notice, from the years of experiences to be ministry context change. I'm not as active. My pulpit ministry is not what it used to be. And it's not because I'm a failing preacher. The whole context of it has changed. Revivals are not something that is a high priority for churches anymore for whatever reason. And so that has moved us, God has shown me over the years that He is not, the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. He hasn't changed His calling on my life. He hasn't He hasn't taken it away. I'm still an evangelist. I'm still called to be an evangelist. I just need to keep moving and find out where it's going from here. So be open to change, because the times change and ministry context changes at times. And so we got to be open to that as well. Um, oftentimes when we go, this would be the third point. Oftentimes when we go on ministry, we go on ministry for the purpose of changing the lives of those we minister to. But I notice, if you'll read the stories and the biographies of many of the missionaries, the first life God changed was the life of the missionary. And so you've got to be willing to put your pride and yourself aside and, let God do something in your life first. So I guess that'd be the 3 points right off the top of my head I'd give to somebody just starting out.
We talked this morning, it's such a vast field. We've got 7 billion people on the planet. There's lots of different, they're not unlimited scenarios, so there's lots of different scenarios.
Right.
It's really so much. That's what you don't see. I didn't see it. The opportunities are immense. Not a limited field. I know, we're the God of Gideon's army, but we got, just numerically speaking, then the other thing that you learn is dealing with people takes time, and a few people can take a lot of time. And that really begets more people getting engaged in some form of ministry, reaching people. It's not, a one guy can have a body of people that we call a church, but ministry extends beyond that moment. That's not something that I really see it now, but I've been interested. I grew up in the church, so the opportunities are immense. That's for sure. Good. All right, man. Well, good. Well, tell us about like right now, what you're doing now, what's in the future for you.
Well, we haven't abandoned our pulpit ministry. We still have an active pulpit ministry, and so we do preach quite a bit in churches. Still preparing for that kind of ministry. I get a number of regular opportunities to preach in the pulpit, preaching this Sunday, preaching the next Sunday, and then in mid-May preaching as well. So we're still doing that. I've started doing some stuff since Super Bowl outreach. We live in a small, Calhoun is the county seat of the county, and it's not even, Cleveland's probably demographically where you live 30,000, where Calhoun's probably 20 to 22,000 demographically. And so there's not a lot of opportunity of foot traffic where you can engage people with the preaching of the gospel. It's a lot of automobile traffic. So we started carrying gospel signs down to the courthouse, where automobile traffic is much slower. And Brandon was on my Super Bowl team, and we did that. The first day we went down there, a guy came walking up to me from the courthouse and says, "Hey man, I love what you're doing, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Well, give me your name and number." And I said, I'll get in touch with you. So I got in touch with him that Thursday, and we went out down into the main intersection of town, and I had 3 crosses, 10-foot crosses. We went down and just held crosses. And so he's been with me every time I go out. This other fella goes out and he holds a cross. He made me he had me make him 2 crosses. So we've got crosses, and we do that. And we were down there, the 3 of us were down there the other day on Tuesday. And I look over where Brandon's standing, and there's a guy with a piece of poster board and something wrote on it. And I look at it and it says something about Jesus. Well, this kid was him and his wife were driving by, and their church made these poster board signs, and they were on the street holding up these poster board signs. And he saw us on the street, and he told his wife, "Drop me off." And so, it's interesting, how that God just moves people to be involved in things. And so we're open and receptive to just doing simple things in ministry to get people involved. Will they turn out to be street preachers? I don't really know, but it don't really matter. But they're passionate about doing something in the ministry, and that's exciting to me. So we're doing that, and we're doing probably more street ministry than we ever have. as far as events and stuff like that. We've always had a fair number of outreaches on our calendar every year. My street ministry strengthens my pulpit ministry, and my pulpit ministry really helps me to see the value of the church and how much I need the church. I mean, I need the church praying for me when I'm on these outreaches. I need the church's support to send me on these outreaches. And so, they work together. So that's another thing that I'd really encourage young evangelists is man, you need a church, and you need to understand the value of the church. You need to kind of incorporate the two ministries. The two ministries have to work together. Otherwise, you're just a lone ranger out there by yourself.
That's a good point. I know I've asked this before, but just to get you on the record. So, all your experience, have you thought about starting a church?
No, not yet. So,
I know because it's not your calling, but what would make you apprehensive about not doing it?
I don't know. I've been in ministry long enough, and I've been in a lot of churches preaching, and there are times when you can really tell when someone's out of their element. And oftentimes what happens is evangelists, especially in the pulpit ministry, when evangelists are doing pulpit ministry, when that dries up, they'll go into the pastorate because they're used to being in ministry, and you can tell when an evangelist is pastoring a church, he's outside of his element. And you can also tell when a pastor gets disgruntled with the ministry and decides he's going to be an evangelist. You can tell when he's out of his element as well. And so, that's just my element. That's where I'm going to stay until God changes something. So if it happens, it happens. Like I said, always got to be open to what the changes that will occur in ministry. So I'm not totally closed-minded to it, but it's not something that's on the forefront of my mind.
Okay, well, great. Well, Mark, thanks for chatting. So you got a busy weekend this weekend, and then next weekend, and then May the 16th.
Right.
Anything else coming? Pray for you for?
No, just our local stuff. God is building a small army of sign holders and cross toters. So, but yeah.
Man. Fourth Watch is the name of the ministry. How can somebody contact you if they want to join you, talk to you, or maybe they come down and hang out with you in Calhoun?
Usually my personal Facebook page is the best way, Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
Best way to get in touch.
What's the link?
Just I'm not real technologically savvy, but just friend me on Facebook, Mark Yoho at Facebook, whatever it is, and then contact me through Messenger. So.
Fantastic. There it is. Okay.
Yep, there you go.
All right, Mark, great to you. You'll be in my prayers, and we'll hopefully see each other soon.
Look forward to it. Thanks for having us on, Bill.
Come down and we'll come down and hunt some whatever you got down there to hunt.
Hey man,
at least
I'm gonna take you on an all-night snipe hunt.
Is that where the snipes are down there in the Sugar Valley?
They're deep in the woods, man. Deep in the woods.
I'm afraid of, man. I don't do well outside. All right. All right, Mark. Good to be with you. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Bill. God bless you.